Hey, ladies, welcome back to the Finding Joy in Your Home podcast. I am your host, Jamie Balme, and I am super glad you are joining me here. We are going to be talking about healthy eating, doing it on a budget, fitting it into busy schedules, and my favorite topic of grinding your own grains. But we're going to cover a bunch of topics. Today, I have a guest on the show, which we had a really fun conversation, Felicia from grainsandgrit.com, where she teaches all about how to grind your own grains. We actually use very similar processes in our kitchen. And so I had a great time being able to pick her brain. What kind of grains do you like? Why do you enjoy doing this for your family? We had a lot of fun. Her website is fantastic, grainsandgrit.com. She's got how to get started, the tools you need, all kinds of stuff, and it's organized really well. So you can go check that out. We had a great chat that we'll get to in just a minute. I have one announcement for you. We have the next round of our 14-day meal plan boot camp starting October, what's next Monday? The 16th? Something like that. Whatever this next Monday is. I think it's the 16th. We're going to be kicking off. It's a 2-week meal plan boot camp. You can join us anytime because everything is pre-recorded so that once that day's lesson goes live, you have access to it then for life. So what we are going to be doing is we are creating fall meal plans, and we are overall creating rotating seasonal meal plans so that we can set up these meal plans, put the work in beforehand, and have these meal plans that we can use again and again all throughout the year, which is absolutely fantastic. We ran this boot camp the first time in the summer, and it was life-changing. We had several hundred women getting together, sharing resources, talking about summer recipes. Well, now we're back and we're doing the same thing for our fall meal plans. And it's much more than just fall. Like, you don't have to do a seasonal meal plan. You can set up just a rotating every 4-week meal plan or whatever kind of system. We're going to talk about a lot of different systems for meal planning. It'll be much more broad than that, but that's what I'm personally working on, will be my fall meal plan. It is going to be amazing. So you can join with lifetime access. Just go to findingjoyshop.com, and we're going to be doing it together. It's a community. So there's just a whole lot of fun going on. So findingjoyshop.com. All right. Well, without further ado, we're going to go ahead and jump into this fantastic interview now with Felicia. Hey, ladies, I am so excited for our conversation today here on the podcast. I have got Felicia from grainsandgrits.com. Felicia, welcome to the podcast.
Yay. Thanks. It's great to be here.
So we're talking today about one of my favorite topics, which is grinding grains, baking bread, doing this for a family, but with very limited time, all of those good things. So I want to jump right in because I've got lots of questions for you. So very first thing is, tell us a bit about yourself and your journey into grinding grains. I know you have a large family, you homestead. What does all of that look like for you?
Yes. So it's a very busy life. It's not a dull moment, I will say. So my husband, Joshua, and I have been married for 13 years. And like you said, we have our large family. We keep our kids off of social media, so we don't give details how many we have. But I've got the big van. People stare at us. We get all the comments. So yeah, we definitely qualify as large family. And we homeschool. We're also part of Classical Conversations. I'm a tutor. I'm the essentials tutor for our community, and I love it. We've also been homesteading for about a decade. I've been milling my wheat for about, over a decade now. It's enough. It's a long time. And, yeah. And so I'm kind of very similar to you, where whenever I did start grinding my wheat, I also could barely cook. So I did not know how to cook when I got married. Yeah. I'm basically a recovering conservative feminist, as I used to say. And so I was not really prepared for marriage at all. Thankfully, my husband was, but I was not. And so, like, maintaining a home, like all these things I've had to learn, including cooking. And then we started our kind of a health journey. We just started researching things about health. And then an older couple hosted us one time, and they made us breakfast, and they're putting, pancakes in front of us. I'm like, what is this? It was just something different about these pancakes. And they told us about, oh, well, we mill our own wheat. And I'm like, great. And I'm in my early 20s. And this is the first time I've ever even thought about where flour, bread, all that
Yeah.
came from, which is so laughable now. But, it's just something I just didn't think
You
about.
don't think
And
about
so
it.
they
Yeah.
told us this is what they do. And we have wheat berries and we make our own flour and here's a CD and you need to listen to it. And I'm like, okay, all I know is these pancakes are amazing. And, and for once, like we were full very fast. I don't think we even ate lunch that day. Like it carried with us
Yeah.
and it was out of town. We were out of town. And so on our way back home, we listened to this and they gave us Sue Becker's talk, Do Not Eat the Bread of Idleness.
Mhm.
And we listened to it and immediately said, yes, we're going to do this.
Yeah.
And so about a month later, we got a grain mill that we got off of eBay back in the day when you could do that. And it was refurbished. So that was my first grain mill, Miss Wanda. She's my Wonder Mill, refurbished. And I got that. And then we got like a 7-pound bucket of, I think, hard red wheat from Bread Becker's. And then I think we got soft white wheat at the time. I don't know. And then their red cookbook. And I just started.
Yeah.
And soon after that, my aunt found that I was, trying to make my own bread and she had a stand mixer she no longer needed. And so she said, would you like it? I'm like, absolutely. And
Yes.
so I started with this little stand mixer that was given to me, this $100 grain mill I got from eBay. And I just started. And for the life of me, I could not get a loaf of bread. So I just started, but we really believed in this. I at least had my husband fully on board wanting this, and bless his heart, suffered through many things, many bad recipes. And because I just started for years, I only made like basically hamburger buns and like hoagie style buns because that's all that I could make. I could not make a loaf.
Yeah.
And then eventually we moved out to our first piece of property where we were in this dinky little camper trailer and I didn't have an oven. And I'm now making bread in this teeny little toaster oven, which no rising bread there. It was only hamburger buns and hoagie rolls. And so, yeah, that's what I started with for the longest time. And that's just what I stuck with for years. And I think I would make the occasional muffins. I would do maybe pancakes every now and then, but that's kind of all I started with. And it wasn't until a few years ago that my husband said, okay, I'm tired of the little hamburger buns. You need to start branching out. And I finally did. And then I started making my own. I finally figured out a loaf recipe that worked. And it kind of blew up from there. And then a year from that, my husband suggested that I start a YouTube channel all about grains, just real whole grains. We do it from a biblical perspective. And here we are now, I think, how long has it been? Oh, like 2 years later. And it's all I talk about. And I didn't think I could post as many videos as I did. I was like, how many videos could I possibly make? A lot. I can make a lot. And it's kind of grown from there. But it's so funny how just for years because there was really no help. You were there, there wasn't much.
Yeah.
And now more people since 2020.
Yeah.
I would say more people are talking about it. And now there's more resources available, but you were in the same boat. I was in the same boat. We just didn't really have much and we kind of had to figure it out. And now we're helping other people where they don't have to flounder like we did and helping other people out. So yeah, that's kind of our journey. And through all this, learning homesteading and figuring out homeschooling and building our family. And like, it's been crazy. It's been a journey.
Well, before we get into kind of some of the practical stuff, I'd love to hear what is it about grinding grains that you do love so much? Like, is it the taste? Is it baking bread for your family? What is it about this that has become so important to you and your family?
Well, it's really interesting because I would say I first started if you were to ask me why I started my YouTube channel about it, I would say because of 2020. People now, flour was no longer available in the store. People started figuring out, oh, there's this thing called grinding your grains. And then now grain mills were sold out, mixers were sold out, all the things were sold out. But the people who had it had questions. And I was starting to see these questions like on, Facebook or groups that I was in, and I could answer them because by then I had years,
Yeah.
under my belt, and I could at least tell you what not to do.
Yes.
And so I would say that's kind of the reason I started my channel, but I would say the reason that has kept it going and I have become even more passionate about it is because multiple reasons. And I would say one is that it is truth. The fact that in a world that tells us constantly, here's what you should eat, here's what you shouldn't eat. And it's insane, the things that they have out there. It is so confusing as far as what we should be eating. But as a Christian, I know that I can go to the Bible and say, well, let's just see what God created for food. And when you really start looking in the Bible, it's amazing to see how much he talks about grains. You don't actually see a lot of vegetables or things like that, but Jesus compared himself to the bread of life. Why? Why bread? Why of all the foods he could have chosen, it was bread. And I think because especially now that gluten and bread is so demonized. There's so many lies out there and misinformation. I don't know if I could say deception, but a lot of misinformation about it because people don't know. Yes, white flour is bad, but that's actually not real food. It's like we're demonizing, people are speaking out against peanuts because M&Ms might make people fat. It's like, well, that's M&Ms. Have you actually just had the peanuts? And so I think that's why I'm more passionate, because our world is full of lies. And I can't preach about all of them, but I can about this one. And this is the area because it's in my realm. I have more experience, and this is something that I can talk about. And I found that it has been an amazing opportunity to tell people about the Lord, to show people that the Bible is true. It is still relevant for today. And even down to what we eat, it's there. And God gave it to us, and we just have to open up our Bible and actually see it there.
Well, and I get confronted with this a lot because I talk about grinding grains and I talk a lot about healthy eating and trying to take a lot of processed junk out of our food, and not in a dogmatic way. There's times where we reach for something convenient, that's totally fine. But a lot of times when I'm talking about healthier eating and stuff, people are like, yeah, but you still have bread, as if bread automatically means that it's unhealthy. And we're just so backwards in realizing that you can actually make bread that's a whole food, that's amazing for you, that's stocked with nutrients. And a lot of times people will say, well, how do I make it gluten-free? And there are people who absolutely have to be gluten-free. Okay, so that's fine. But a lot of times these gluten-free mixes are the equivalent of white flour. They're not nutritious. And a lot of gluten-free products in the store are packed full of junk. But for some reason in our society, we equate gluten-free with that's healthy. And anything that has gluten is not. And it's just, we get so backwards that we need to really kind of shake it down to the foundations and say, what are whole foods? What are they doing in our body? How are they nourishing? And of course, there's a lot of other discussions we can get into from there. But I really do. And a big part of our current paleo focus is thinking that we evolved from cavemen who didn't eat grains anyway, and grains have only been introduced to man's diet very modernly. And as Christians, we disagree with that. Adam and Eve were working the fields. Cain and Abel had what was probably einkorn in their field. They were baking bread. Some of man's earliest food. We were designed to process grains. And so there's just such a big difference that I love that you bring that back to it, because it's a much bigger discussion, like you said, of all of this information of bread is always bad. Well, it's not. We just need to figure out how to do it in the right way. And by the way, then it's amazing and delicious.
Yes. And I think, there is, and the confusion is, I would say, dangerous to Christians, because the world is saying, oh, well, here's why you can't eat bread. It's because we evolved from, we were hunter-gatherers for thousands of years after we evolved from the primordial goo, and that is very dangerous. And people might say, what's the big deal? But I would say it's a huge deal because truth matters. What God did for us. I mean, it matters. Just like, creation ministries really use dinosaurs
Yeah.
to show like, no, like this, I would say dinosaurs is like the bread of the creation versus evolution debate, because it's the
Yeah.
one thing that people know about, but yet it is being taught wrong. I think we can all agree that, dinosaurs existed, but I would say maybe they're not even extinct. I mean, and so, but now let's actually, what does the Bible say about that? Because people can
Yeah.
really be led astray and start questioning their Bibles
Yeah.
because of what you might consider minor issues, like who cares
Yeah.
about, if people say dinosaurs are living or not. I would say it is something to care about, because ultimately it's, what did God say? And I would say this
Yeah.
is one thing with bread, is that it can be used as a tool, for not only evangelism, but also just another way of kind of proving and showing, maybe God knows what he's talking about.
Yeah.
Maybe man's ways are not a good idea all the time.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And that we chase these modern fads. And, I think of our food system in America, we are so blessed in so many ways. And
Mhm.
yet the access to grocery stores with all of this food at our fingertips makes us think that it's normal to be juicing greens for 3 meals a day. And like, that's what we should be living on. And it costs you $9,000 a month,
Yes.
and it makes you think that to eat healthy, it has to be, that you're living off of vegetables all day long, every single day, when in fact, God has made our bodies, to eat real food and to eat a spread of real food. But actually, maybe that's supposed to include a lot more healthy bread products
Mhm.
than we think. And that it's not supposed to be limiting all carbs and all,
Mhm.
God has a design in it. And also, then from a practical standpoint, when we're trying to feed our families and we're on a very real budget and prices are rising, it can feel so discouraging when we can't follow all these trends in eating.
Mhm.
And we can't eat the healthy way that we think we're supposed to, when
Yeah.
you could just make very inexpensive, nourishing bread for your family and actually serve them really well. It does get
Mhm.
it gets really hard. And that's why I think I get passionate too, from that practical standpoint of, there's so many things we can do for our families that don't have to be crazy and, expensive, all of that.
Yes, it is. Surprisingly and amazingly, it is, kind of the simple foods
Yes.
that are usually end up being the best for us.
Yes.
Where I do think it is a huge, people do get discouraged, that Christians do get discouraged of how, because I think many of us, especially as moms, like we want to feed our kids
Yeah.
good food. We
Well,
want to feed them, the best food that we can, that is going to be good for their bodies, that they're not going to cause them to be sick, and all of these things. But it can be so discouraging to go to the grocery store and, you think of this one way to feed your kids, and like, oh, I have to buy organic and I have to make sure this, it's grass fed or whatever the case. And, it's legit. Not everyone can afford it.
yeah.
And it can feel like you're a big failure in a way.
Yeah.
Also, those who, are on a diet, they're trying to lose weight, or they're trying to, say, get their cholesterol under control, or their blood sugar, or whatever it is. And I've seen multiple comments on my channel, various places, where people just said, I was so discouraged, and I just prayed out to God, like, show me what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah.
Like, what am I supposed to do? And then, like, my video pops up, or like one of Sue Becker's videos pops up
Yeah.
about real whole grains, and like,
Yeah.
oh, this is
Yeah.
just like an answer to
Yeah.
prayer,
Yeah.
which is amazing to me
Yeah.
every time I hear that. Because, you might think that might be silly, that, it's not a big deal, but for people, those who are sick, it's a big deal. For those
Yeah.
who think they can never afford to eat healthy, this is a big deal, because this is a way, guess what? You can, and it's not as expensive as you think it is.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of funny. Along those lines, I'm listening right now to it's a book on like resetting your hormones. And she's
Mm.
talking a lot about food. And I don't agree with her on a lot of the stuff. And on one of the chapters, she's talking about grains. And she's like, grains are terrible for your hormones. You just need to go off all grains. You just need to
Mhm.
not ever have them. You can get your carbs from broccoli. You don't need grains. And she starts to say that like, it's the blanket statement grain and flour is bad for your blood sugar. Grain
Yes.
and flour is bad for all these things. Well, she's referring to white flour solely,
Yes.
but she's lumping it into, because the thing is, most people don't know how to do this. You don't even realize, like you were saying, I had no idea there was different kinds of wheat. There's
No.
flour, there's white flour, and there's wheat flour. That's what I thought. Well, no, there's like a million things. So last year, we were wondering if Jason, my husband, was having some blood sugar issues. One of his sisters had gestational diabetes, and we thought, okay, maybe you're having some blood sugar issues. So he wore a blood sugar, whatever they're called, monitor, glucose monitor, and we were testing out different things. And white flour obviously just spikes your, glucose. And he would have my whole grain, like spelt sandwich loaf, and his blood sugar was beautiful. It was absolutely stable, and in fact, for the next 2 to 3 hours, it would stay more stable than if he hadn't eaten it. And so it's just amazing that it's like, oh, bread is terrible, for all these things. And I have people say, well, I'm diabetic, I can't eat those. Well, actually, so much of this, the whole grains are so good for blood sugar. They're what stabilize it. Like, there's so many amazing things that we just don't know. And I get it. I didn't know this before diving into all of this. It's just, it feels like, oh, you're just talking about bread. But actually, I feel like it's so far reaching in its application that both of us obviously get very passionate about it.
Yes. And I do know, for those of you who might be listening who have been diagnosed with diabetes, obviously we're not medical doctors, but
yes,
that is probably, for me personally, I know Sue Becker talks about how wart testimonies are kind of the largest ones that she receives. For me, I see more about diabetes. I see tons of testimonies of people telling me that, in their cholesterol, where, their cholesterol actually now normalizes. Those with diabetes, they state that when they eat this bread from freshly milled wheat, that their blood sugar does not spike, that it actually fills them up. They find that they lose weight because now you're not eating as much because your body is actually satisfied. So I would say that's probably the number one testimony that I receive the most, is those who, with diabetes or with some sort of sugar issue, where they're now able to have bread again.
Yeah.
Because this is shown, if you just Google it now, you got to search for it. Yeah. Because this information is difficult to find. But if you find like a huge, massive chart that talks about the glycemic index, and it's going to show your high index foods, it's immediately going to put bread on there. Yeah. But many of them now, I think, are starting to specify that, oh, this is white bread. Yeah. And then way down the line, you might see something like wheat berries or hard red wheat berries, so it's not exactly whole grain bread. You actually have to I find that they're breaking it down by the wheat berry. And it's very low on the glycemic index. So you got to search for it, but it's there. And imagine being told, here you have this disease and one of your favorite foods you now can't have, but now you can. Yeah. So long as it's prepared the right way.
Yes. Okay. Well, so let's get into that then. And on the practical side, what are some of your favorite grains to bake with? And I love talking to people about this to see because those of us who grind grains, we all often have different favorites, and we kind of gravitate towards different things depending on our taste and our family's taste. So what are your favorite grains to bake with? And I know you said you have a lot, so go for it.
I have a lot. Last time I counted, it was over 30 different types.
I love that.
Of grains. Now that is because I get a ton, because with my channel, I like to experiment. So, and people ask me questions. So you do not need 30 different. When I first started, I had two. I had 2 different grains. And, okay. So I will say this changes. But I would say overall right now, one of my favorite I do enjoy hard white wheat. I find myself lately reaching for my hard white more so than my hard red. I don't know necessarily why. I think just lately I've had a hankering for kind of more of a milder tasting bread. And I find that hard white is, I think, more universal of a hard wheat to use than hard red. But I mean, it kind of just depends. I like hard red. I also like a mixture of 50-50 hard white, hard red. I would say that's probably my favorite mixture that I do, which that is the other beauty of milling your own grains, is you can actually just make your own
Yes.
variety. That, and I've gotten into a Camus kick lately. I've
Oh, yeah.
discovered the nuance of Camus.
Mhm.
And so yeah, I have been enjoying experimenting. That is a more difficult grain. I would not recommend that for newbies.
Yeah.
Many of the recipes that I try, I go pure by gut instinct whenever I'm using Camus because it's just
Yeah.
different. But it is a very mild, and whenever I finally use Camus for rolls, I mean, you would thought that they were store bought with white flour.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
they were so light
Yeah.
and they look white. I mean, you would think I used white flour.
Yeah.
They are my favorite. Camus rolls are my favorite.
Mm.
But I would say, yeah, right now in this moment, I would say hard white and Camus are kind of my favorite. And of course, soft white,
Yeah.
mainly just for universal. It's just for baked goods. I'm reaching for my soft white. But yeah, so far, those are the three. And then, of course, I love corn because cornbread.
Yes.
And I need corn.
Yes.
So,
you have to have that.
but yeah. But yeah, I have many, but those are the ones that if that's all I've got,
Yeah.
I would be content with
Yes.
those are the only ones I have.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Well, our baking habits are very different, which is,
Mhm.
that's what I love about this is you can get very, try out a bunch of different kinds and you kind of just slowly start gravitating towards the ones that you like that are working well for you. I mean, baking also does make a big difference on your geography and your climate of where
Yes.
you are at. It's going to make a really big difference. And so if you can't get a certain grain to rise properly, like trying different ones, they have different moisture content, like that can actually make a big difference. So I wonder sometimes too, if we gravitate towards different things depending on where we're at in our climate,
Yes.
because it makes a big difference.
Yeah, I think so. And I think especially some people's recipes. So
Yeah.
I don't think I mentioned this, but I'm in Florida. So we
Okay.
are in the subtropics. Now
Yes.
I'm above the frost line in Florida. Florida geography is very unique.
Yeah.
So South Florida is like, it's never going to get cold. It's not ever going to get to freezing. We can get to freezing temperatures here, but which I'm thankful for.
Yeah.
And but it can be hot, humid, like crazy. So for
Yes.
me, I find yeah, things are just different. So what works for me here, I'm a far cry from someone who's like in Denver, Colorado or
Yeah.
Phoenix, Arizona, where it's still
Yeah.
hot, but it's not
Dry.
as
Yeah.
humid, it's drier. So some people state that my recipe doesn't work for them. Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine.
Yeah.
I no hard feelings at all.
Yeah.
Find you one that works and then
Yep.
stick to it.
Yep.
So, but yeah, ultimately it can be done, but that's why it frustrates people. I know that I do not weigh my ingredients.
I do not either.
Yeah. And this is one of the reasons why is because unlike all purpose flour, like I can buy King Arthur flour here and
Yeah.
you can buy that same flour in Oklahoma. Someone in Washington state can buy it as well. But with, say, if I was to get hard white wheat and I get it from a certain company and you have hard white wheat even, but you get it from another company and their growing season might have been different. There are just these nuances. And so that's why I don't weigh. I'm teaching you the more of the art of it. Like, here's what you need to look for.
Yeah.
And I think that frustrates people for those who are more of the, like, just give me the recipe.
Mhm.
And I give you the recipe, but here are things you got to learn.
Yeah.
But you'll learn and you'll
Yeah.
adjust and you'll learn to
Yeah.
adapt. And do not ask me about high altitude cooking. I am not
Yes. Yes.
the one. I'm like, Google it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what to tell you because I'm a far cry.
Yeah.
High altitude.
And it makes a huge difference, but most of us just live in one town and we don't realize. So we once had 2 years where we traveled around the country full time and I was baking that whole time. And I tell you what, I had crash courses in realizing, why is this not rising? Why did this rise so fast? Why is it, by cooking time, there's so many things that you do need to adjust, which can feel discouraging for someone who's new, but really you just have to figure out what works well for you, especially with rising time and moisture content. And so you play with the recipes and you do Google. If you are at 7,000 feet above sea level, you just need to Google how that is going to adjust. And if you live at sea level, the same thing. You need to kind of figure out what that's going to be like. But I definitely, like, I agree. I think even when I'm making my own recipes here in my house, and yet you've made it 100 times, sometime it's just going to come out a little drier or it's a little more wet. And I know just to sprinkle a little bit more flour in. And that's the kind of thing with freshly ground grains, even from batch to batch, they can differ a little bit, which sounds scary. But once you've done it 10 times, it's not. I'm like, oh, it's a little wet. And I mean, half the time I'm not even actually exactly measuring. I'm just throwing it in until I'm like, oh, the dough looks good. And then you bake it. And I never would have thought that I could have those skills. But once you do it enough, it really does become second nature. And it's not as scary.
Yeah, I remember people have been doing this for thousands of years. Before we had standardized measurements and scales and sourdough. Like, people have been doing this because eventually you're going to learn the feel, you're going to learn what you're going for, and you're going to learn what you need to adjust. So you just got to keep at it. It is an art as much as I would say it's a little bit more of an art. Science. But like,
I agree.
We're talking like a 60-40. 60% art, 40% science. Because you do just, you need to be able to make those adjustments as you go, but also know, where you need to adjust.
Yeah. And you gain that through experience of trying it and failing, and you try again and you start to figure it out. Okay. So what I want to ask is, how do you've got a busy household, busy homestead. So how do you integrate whole grains into a busy schedule? What are some tips? Because a lot of people are thinking, that's great, but I'm already so busy trying to get dinner on the table. Now you want me to cook bread? Like, so what does that look like in a busy schedule for you?
Well, first of all, you have to realize that you are going to be slow at first. It's going to be slow. I remember the first time I ever milled and made like a recipe, and I felt like it took forever because I'm constantly having to look at the recipe and like measure things and all this stuff. So you are going to be slow at first. When you begin, it is going to take you more time. So plan for the more time. Save your more elaborate recipes when you know you're going to have more time. So that's the biggest tip. You're going to get faster the more experience you get. And I think ultimately it is one of those things that if it is a priority for you, you will find a way to do it, and you will determine to do it. So for me, I mean, in a way, it's almost like I have no choice. Like, we have to do this because this is what feeds my family. And sometimes I have to just be baking bread at 8:00 at night, and that's okay. But just also remember that I'm not going out back with a mule and like walking this mule around a grindstone. We have electric grain mills. We have these really nice mixers, like the Bosch Universal Mixer, the Anarskam, the Nutrimel RTs that can have higher capacity and pretty much do all the work for you. So like I throw the grains into my mill and I'm walking away and I come back. I put the ingredients in my mixer and I'm walking away and I'm coming back. So we have modern technology now that definitely makes it so much faster. And, we also have bread machines that can do it, that I do recommend for people who are just that busy but want bread. And I use mine too for moments when I'm like, oh, I forgot to make bread and we need it for the morning. No problem. Dump it in the bread machine and I've got at least one loaf of bread for the morning. So you do need to just kind of realize that. Like, I know it's intimidating and it seems like so many extra steps, but there are ways to do it. And like you do it where, some people have it where it's one day of baking and they get that within a few hours baking for the week. Keep it in your fridge. You can freeze things where you're not always baking. So there are ways to do it. And again, for me, we're baking loaves of bread is second nature to me. So I can homeschool my kids and like be milling and then, help someone with a math problem and also scheduling. So We do have schedules and rhythms, especially because my kids are various ages. So there are times where, this is a time where I'm not making bread because I am teaching phonics, or this child needs my help with math. And so for me, I have to understand that, like,
Yeah.
I do like block scheduling because we need that flexibility. But like in this block, I don't need to be making bread.
Yeah.
And I need to just plan better to be able to do this. And then, this block, like, this is the block that I can bake bread, and also like whatever else I might need to be doing during that time. So yeah, I mean, it can be done. And remember, women have been doing this for thousands of years with large families, with none of our modern conveniences. Like, they are out there, like, even still today, there are women out there that are like manually grinding their grains. Now that's like all they do. It seems like they are only baking and cooking and stuff. But we have these conveniences today.
Yeah.
Just know it's going to be slow at first, but you can do it, and you will learn what fits well with your schedule.
Yeah. Well, and I think even, for us too, we're homeschooling during the day. So that's often my morning is like, I will be putting up, the rolls for dinner, and they're kneading in the mixer, and I'm helping a kid with a math problem, and then I take it out. So I'm able to layer it. But there's a lot of people too who are gone during the day. And I still think there's so many things you can do after you're cleaning up dinner. You could make homemade rolls for the next day very easily. Like, throw your ingredients in the mixer and turn it on. It's going to knead it for you for 5 minutes. So you can be finishing up the dishes and load it up. And then you just stick it in a bowl, let it rise for an hour, come back, put them in the oven. I mean, like, you can do this in an evening while you're walking around getting stuff ready for the next day. And then you've got them in the fridge ready for tomorrow. Like, there's really simple things you can do. And I think a lot of times on social media and online, the like really fancy artisan loaves and like the bread recipes that take a lot longer, those are the fancy ones that get like shared and spread because they look cool. And so people just think I have absolutely no time. And what I've learned is we don't do a whole lot of these fancy artisan loaves because they're just not super practical. I'm making 48 dinner rolls that are going to last us for several dinners. Like, we're doing much more practical things, but there's stuff that you can do quick. It's not this fancy stuff. And I think people don't realize how practical the bread baking can be.
Yes. And I think you hit a point there of like, it's those fancy breads that are shared. I mean, there's a reason why sourdough took off in 2020, because now everyone was at home. And do not get me wrong, I do believe that sourdough, or I would say using wild yeast, is definitely obviously the way that God originally created it. I mean, we don't have our commercial yeast that didn't come around to the late 1800s, but bakers rejoiced when it did. And just know it's still yeast. It's fewer strands. And I would say that if your holdup is you think that I can only have sourdough bread, let go. Let go of that, because what's most important is that you're milling your grains, that you are consuming whole grains, even with commercial yeast, because the yeast is the minor thing. I would say the most important thing are all of those vitamins and nutrients that's in the whole grain. That is, you're getting that fiber, you're getting all of the benefits. And if you're just forsaking that because you are not able to do sourdough, or you're doing sourdough with dead white flour, you're kind of missing the point. So don't be so concerned if you are unable to do sourdough. It's okay. Like, let it go for now. Like, it's fine. Because I get asked that all the time, and I'm still working on perfecting sourdough with freshly milled grains, because it can be done. But it takes so much time. Like, there's a reason that I have not done it, because I'm like, this takes so long. Like, it takes forever to do, and for like one loaf. Like, I'm normally cranking out 3 loaves, sometimes 4, and
you have to plan ahead so much. You have to get it started the night before and do all the things. And sometimes that happens. But when you're a really busy household, often I need to just be like, I'm doing rolls for dinner right now. And it's happening in this moment because, oh, yes, I can throw that together. And so I'm not hating on sourdough. We love sourdough. But if it comes down to it, to me, I would rather have freshly milled, yeast breads than a white flour sourdough. And often people will make that other choice, which is fine, because they assume like sourdough is always better. And it's just not true when you're looking at the flour content. And freshly ground sourdough is harder. That is a different animal. And so I agree. Don't just give up and say, well, I'm not going to do anything then. Start with those basics. And I think it's helpful to learn how to do freshly milled baking first, and you can move into the sourdough, but it's a more advanced thing. Leave that for later down the line. Even us, we're still trying to figure it out. Leave that for later down the line and just do what you can. And that's something I say all the time is do the best you can with what you have and trust the Lord with the rest. So do these baby steps that you can do now, even if you're not buying everything organic or all of the best of this or that. Do what you can. And thankfully, grinding grains, while it can feel overwhelming, is actually something really simple that we can integrate that can be a really good step in our family's health and, all those good things you already shared.
And you're going to see the benefits without the sourdough. Like, trust me, trust me, you will see the benefits. Because I would say the larger benefit is in using the whole grains than it is just that. Like, sourdough is just one element of it. Where there's far more benefits with using whole grains. And another thing with time is we say that, you hear time is money.
Yeah.
And one of the big hangups that I hear people say is, oh, well, grain mills are so expensive and these mixers are so expensive. And I would say, yes, they are an investment, just like my oven and my refrigerator and my washing machine. These are investments, but I see them as my maidens. The Proverbs 31 woman had maidens. Well, guess what? I don't have physical maidens, but I do. This is why I name
electronic ones.
Yes, I have electronic ones. And this is why I actually name like my grain mills and my mixers. Like I name them because I say like they're my maidens because they do save me time. And if you don't have the time, invest in the maidens, invest in a way you're outsourcing sort of, invest that because we have that ability. These days, we have the modern technology where there's a reason why they had maidens and why people had servants, because it is a lot of work. If you have to do all of this by hand and you're feeding a large family, like it is a big endeavor. Like the Proverbs 31 had maidens for a reason, and she would not have been able to do everything that she did if she was the only one doing all of the things. So that's one thing, to look at. And I know not everyone can just jump right in and do that. It was, use what you have right now. If you have a stand mixer right now, okay, use it. I did for years before it finally kicked the bucket. And I then got me the Bosch Universal Mixer Plus, which I love.
Yes.
And, you don't have to go out and buy all the things and pray, as silly as it might seem to pray to the Lord for like a mixer or something like that. Jesus still said to just ask, ask him. And I do 100% believe asking for a grain mill, he will answer those prayers. Cause I do think that is an essential tool for every household. So you can actually consume whole grains. And so I do think the Lord sees that as something important. And just pray about it. And, the Lord, if you're walking with him, he's going to answer your prayers. But that's another thing to look at is, time is money. And you may have all the time in the world to grind your grains by hand, to knead it by hand. Good for you. I don't. And so I am grateful for my maidens that were an investment, but they have also lasted me for years. And I don't think I will have to buy another Bosch ever. I mean, these are heavy duty, powerful machines that are meant to last. And I've been using mine hardcore for about 2 years now and not a problem at all.
Yeah. And the investment, though, will end up paying for itself. The amount of money you will save in buying bread products and all kinds of things over the years, it will save you money. It will pay off. Like the way that we buy grains in bulk now, like that's also partly why we do it. It's not just the health. It's not just that they taste better, that they're more nutritious. It saves us boatloads of money. Like if I was going to buy these bread products every week at the store for our family, we wouldn't be able to do it and we wouldn't have the same health. And so that is a big reason why we do that, is because of the cost then, and investing in those pieces is going to help quite a lot at the end of the day in kind of recouping that amount. So, all right. Well, Felicia, this was so fun and so many good things to think about. So why don't you tell our audience where they can connect with you over at Grains and Grits? What Grains and Grit? There's no S, right?
Nope, grains with an S and
grit. Yes.
No S. Yes. So it's you can find me on my website. So that's just grainsandgrit.com. And then of course you can find me same name on YouTube and on Instagram. That's where I'm most active, YouTube and Instagram. And all the information is on my website. If you are new to milling grains, I've got some freebies for y'all, like a free newbie guide to milling, many like even one, like I did a grain calculator. I think that was my first freebie to help people figure out like, okay, I want to start, but how long is a 50-pound bag going to last me? And and that's something that I kind of had to figure out. So that's just a cool little freebie. That's all on my website. But yeah, it's just, I'm not as in many places as you are, but YouTube, Instagram, and my website are the main places that you can find me.
Awesome. Well, we'll definitely put those in the links. And I was telling Felicia earlier, grainsandgrit.com is fabulous. Like the way she has laid out all of the resources, like you can just go and click through and find all kinds of different things. She's got recommended products. She's got the Bosch linked there. That's what I use as well. She's got everything linked there, which is really helpful. So Felicia, what grain mill do you use?
Well, I own 3.
Okay. Yeah.
So my first one, I started out with the Wonder Mill impact mill. So she's refurbished. She's the one I got off of eBay for like $100 years ago. And then I do have the Nutri-Mill Harvest, which is a stone grind mill. And then I also have my Wonder Junior Deluxe, which is my hand grind mill. So all manual, but I use them all 3 for different reasons. So the Wonder Mill, if you want fine flour every single time and don't want to think about it, then an impact mill is for you. My stone grind mill, I do like the versatility, where that's where I make my grits, cornmeal, cream of wheat, because I need a coarser grind. I've also made like animal feed there in a pinch whenever I ran out. And so I just cracked some grains to do that. And then the Junior Deluxe I love as a manual mill because first of all, it's extremely heavy duty, but it also has the ability to do my wet grains.
Oh, yes.
So my masa harina. So if I'm making corn tortillas, that's a wetter grain and I can do that in there. And then I can also grind up coffee manually, which I did because we recently had Hurricane Idalia come through.
Oh yeah.
And I wanted some coffee. We had no electricity. And so I just threw some coffee beans in there and I had some coffee. So you don't need 3 grain mills. I do have a video helping y'all decide what grain mill that you would like, because it just depends on what you're wanting. But I would say if you're at my level, 2 grain mills are handy to have. And I know you have multiple ones as well.
But when you're starting out, you don't need to start. Investment in one is enough. I had the Nutri-Mill Harvest is what I had for years, and I did everything in that. I just had it set to the absolute finest, and it was great. It actually worked really, really well, but it's got so many different settings because you can move the stone all around that you just got to kind of lock in that finest grain that you want. You get that. And it worked great. And that's what both my sisters, they have a Nutri-Mill Harvest. They've used them for years. But the thing is, these grain mills are going to last a really, really, really long time. So it's an investment for sure. But I mean, also I tell people all the time, look on Facebook Marketplace. You can find them on Facebook Marketplace. I've had a couple people reach out that lucked out. They got an old one at thrift stores because people just give them away. They don't know what to do with them. And so you can really find some good deals because this last 18 months or so, grain mill prices are absolutely through the roof. And I have a YouTube video that's comparing, I have 6 different grain mills out from 2018. And I mean, you look at the prices and, I talk about the prices, and the prices now are like double on all of them. And people find that and they're like, where do I find these prices now? I'm like, sorry, they don't exist anymore. But you still really can. It's still an absolutely worthy investment, and you can find them used. Look on Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, like you can find them. And yeah, you can find the deals out there. So anyway, Felicia, thank you so much for joining us. This was so awesome. I will have the links to your website and all of your stuff in the show notes as well. Thank you for taking the time with us to chat about one of my favorite topics, grinding grains. And thank you for just taking the time today.
Thanks for having me here. It was a pleasure.
All right, ladies. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with me here today. I had such a great time chatting about grains and practical and being real, doing real life cooking in a real kitchen with real kids and real responsibilities. So I hope you liked this interview here with Felicia. Don't forget to check out her website, grainsandgrit.com. I have links for you down below that you can go click on. And we will see you guys back here next week for the next episode.